Hello, outlets. Welcome to episode 20.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's right.
This is episode 20 of Shameless Plugs. Thank you for listening to us this long. Over half a year now, so I'm pretty happy about that. You can't see Samantha doing a dance while holding her tea, but she is dancing while holding her tea.
Holding my tea.
And in true Shameless Plug spirit, I'm going to start this episode off with a plug.
Yeah, do it.
We're on YouTube now.
Yay!
We had posted a couple videos, like our holiday writing prompt challenge and so on. So we had a few videos up there, but now all of our episodes are available on YouTube as well, including this one. If you've linked from the site, if you go to shamelessplugspodcast.com, right up there at the top of the site, there's a link to our YouTube page. So please visit us. Please check out our YouTube channel. Today's topic is... I didn't introduce ourselves. Introduce us, so sorry.
I didn't introduce ourselves.
I didn't introduce ourselves.
It is a morning here.
It's
Shameless Plugs Podcast.
It's a morning.
It is a morning, yeah.
It's a tired, didn't get much sleep last night morning.
Well, it was a rainy night, so...
It was a rainy night.
I blame the rain. I like the rain, though.
Blame it on the rain. Okay. I wonder if I sound better or worse than the front people of Milli Vanilli. Anyway,
Shameless Plug Podcast listeners, dear outlets, please let us know.
Yeah, please don't, actually. Anyway, I am J.A. George. I am joined, as always, by...
Samantha, the writer.
Yes. And today... As I go back to where I was just a minute ago, today we are going to be talking about pacing.
Pacing.
Pace
yourselves.
Yes.
We're talking about pacing.
Yes. So how to control the flow, control the timing, control the pace of your stories. I think this conversation is mostly going to be focused on longer form fiction like novels, but it is... that some of the techniques will be just as useful in short stories and so on as we go along.
Yeah, I agree. I think the tools you can use in whatever you're working on,
Agreed.
I mean, I think they span playwriting, screenwriting, short fiction, long fiction, all of those things. Probably even a little bit of poetry, though neither of us can really speak to that in a...
Not a very educated
manner, so...
I mean,
poets!
Yes. I've written a few poems, but I'm
same.
far from an expert.
Yes, agreed.
I don't have enough experience to say that I really know much about that world.
Yep, Hi, poets!
Yes, we still love you, poets.
Yeah, we do.
No, honestly, I admire the heck out of poets. It's, there's definitely an artistry to it that it's... just I don't have the full understanding of those rhythms and those beats and so on to do it that well. But there's a very high level of artistry there.
Yes, agreed.
So, okay, so I think the thing that a lot of times we lose sight of as writers, and I'm speaking for myself as well here, is the number and the variety of tools we have that we can use to control the pace. I mean, it's a really big toolbox, and a lot of times I think people don't think about that. They don't think of all the ways that they can control the pace.
Do we need to define pace?
Take it away.
So just in case you are new to the writing world, getting yourself started, pace is the way that your story moves. When I think, like, when we were talking about this episode in our, short amount of planning that we try to do, for me, pace is about movement. It's when you're out on a run or you're out on a walk, you don't really stay consistent in your stride the entire time. At certain points you may speed up, at certain points you may slow down, and that's kind of the way that your writing should move as well. And when we talk about pace, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Just in case you're new to the world and the lingo and maybe thought we were talking about some kind of spice.
You hit on something important there. I think that varying pace is important, especially in longer form fiction, because in shorter form you might be able to get away with going at one pace.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose people's interest, but in longer form fiction, if you're going at one speed the entire time, you're going to alienate your readers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're going at a breakneck action story the entire time, it's going to wear your reader out. The reader needs some time to reflect on events. They need some time to breathe, just like your characters do.
Well, and just like you do. I mean,
exactly.
If you're writing at 100 miles an hour and that's all you're writing, that's all you're writing, that's all you're writing, at some point you're going to need a nap.
Well, yeah. I mean, writing becomes one note and just not terribly enjoyable. I can't think of a single story, and I'm talking even movies, I'm talking plays. I can't think of a single story that has gone at one speed the entire time that I would count as one of my favorites. I mean, and, the slower work, overall slower work tends to be more dramatic and literary fiction, but even within those genres, even within those types of works, you still see some variance in pacing. Readers need that.
Yep. Writers
do too.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So back to tools.
Yes. There's so many of them. First and foremost, the length of just about everything you do contributes to the pace. And when I say the length of everything you do, I'm talking chapters, I'm talking sections, I'm talking paragraphs, sentences, words. Every single thing you do, the length of that contributes to the pace.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you have a shorter chapter, that's going to read more easily for a reader, and it's going to go faster. And if they feel like they're moving through the work faster, that's quickening the pace for them.
And at the same time, if your readers get to a section of your novel that's got a lot of words, it's got a lot of paragraphs, it's got a lot of, instead of there being 4 paragraphs on a page, there are 2, all of a sudden things are going to automatically kind of slow down.
Yeah.
It's just the natural form of people to kind of see a big chunk of something and go, I need to pay attention. I need to read this. I need to take it in. I need to slow it down. So, just even thinking about it visually is important.
That's exactly where I was about to go. But,
yeah. It's crazy because we always think of writing as a pure word to brain format. It's, you read the words, you know what's going on, and you move on. But there's also a really important visual aspect to writing that I think gets left behind a little bit.
Yeah.
When you open a book, and we have to have a conversation about e-readers at some point, but I'm not really sure we're going to get there today.
Maybe high level.
Maybe high level, yeah. But when you open a book, first, just even picking up a book, you can kind of get a feel for the length of it, how it is going to move and everything. But then you open that first page, and if you see dialogue immediately, you're going to have a different response to that than if you see 2 paragraphs immediately. It's a very different experience, and I think that experience also adds to pacing, and it's something that's important to think about. Maybe not in your first draft, but as you move through your drafts, look at your pages and look at how they interact. If you've got 2 pages next to each other, think about how they're going to look and how it's going to move.
And some of that's outside your control until it goes to a publisher or whatever. But as you're working, it's still something worthwhile to think about. It's still something worthwhile to look at because, look at visual. I don't think readers consciously sit there and think, oh, this is a longer, this 2-page spread has longer paragraphs. But they do pick up on it subconsciously. I certainly do.
Yeah, I do as well.
It definitely, again, we're not going to get into any level of detail, but that's part of why I have some books on e-reader, but that's part of why I don't love reading on my phone. I have a Amazon Kindle app on my phone. I don't enjoy that experience as much as I do reading a book. It's not that there aren't talented writers out there who are releasing purely for e-reader,
absolutely.
because there are. I've read some things that I really enjoyed by people who are self-publishing on Amazon and everything, but it's just a different experience, and for me, it's not as enjoyable.
Well, and I think you have to take that experience into account. It's, how big is the screen that you're trying to read on? If you're reading on, I think, on a bigger e-reader, you may be able to have that same experience, but if you're on your phone or something, that tiny screen, you're not, all your paragraphs are going to look like the size of the screen, so It's just something to take into consideration when you're
Right.
thinking about
Right.
your novel, how it's going to translate to paper or to electronic.
Yeah, to a screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. But length is something that we do have control over, and there is a visual component to that. But I think that as you're getting into the sentences and everything, the length of your sentences matters. It's cutting out extraneous words. There was, in looking at some of the articles that we were doing research prior to the episode, one of the examples that we came across was the walls of the cathedral versus the cathedral's walls. Now, you can debate which form is appropriate and everything all day, because we had a conversation about some of the examples, but you can debate which one is the appropriate one to use all day long. But the cathedral's walls, using that example, the cathedral's walls is going to lend to a quicker pace than the walls of the cathedral.
Right. And if you're making purposeful choices and you're trying to slow something down because you really want to focus on the environment, you know, I mean, I think we've brought up Stephen King here before, but I think he does that a lot, is he'll purposefully slow things down to describe certain aspects of something that he really wants you to lock in on and take away. So, you know, I think that there's a purposeful way to do something like the walls of the cathedral, because maybe you're going into were built in this time period, and that's really important to your narrator.
Right.
But
in the middle of an action scene, you don't want to use the walls of the cathedral.
No.
It's going to slow things down. It's creating another beat for a reader in there.
Yeah, it's lengthening something that doesn't need the length. Whereas, you know, if all you're saying is like, the cathedral walls were hard because my narrator smashed into them.
Yeah.
That's all you want to say.
Right.
You know, you don't want to be like, the walls of the cathedral were made of stone, and that's why it hurt when my reader, or when my narrator.
Exactly. If you're in the middle of an action scene, especially in first person, the walls of the cathedral were made out of granite taken from as my head smashed into them.
Yes, it doesn't really.
Yeah, that doesn't quite work.
Nope. You're just going to slow it down, and then someone's going to be like, huh?
But I think you hit on something else that's important there in what you were saying. Taking the time to slow down and describe a setting, that's another way of controlling the pace.
It is,
That's a pretty fundamental, common, and useful way of controlling the pace. A lot of times we want to slow down. We want to slow down the story. We want the reader to take those extra beats, whether it's to breathe, whether it's because those things are important to our character, like you said, Samantha. That's another one of the tools at your disposal, is taking the time to describe the setting. Taking the time to describe a person. Taking the time for description is another method of controlling that pace and slowing things down.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I think that that also can be a tool, because if you're slowing it down, a lot of times you're going to be lengthening something, but you can also lengthen something for suspense, which is an interesting which is a very interesting point. And you know,
and I love that point.
I do too, yeah. And if you're, you know, trying to really make your characters feel something, or make your reader like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Like, you can do that actually by adding length into
making the reader wait.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's like, if your birthday's in a week and, you know that there's a present in the closet, you're either going to wait or you're going to look. Like, those are your two options. And if you choose to wait, here comes the suspense. And it's that same kind of concept in writing.
The way that I always think of it is, think about when you were a kid and you were going on vacation, or you were going to the amusement park. The drive there always felt 6 times as long as the drive home, because you had that level of anticipation.
Yeah, there was an excitement. There was a, what's going to happen today?
The reader wants to know when the detective is going to find the serial killer.
Yes.
If you stretch that out over a novel, it's going to keep them turning those pages, and things are going to feel faster because they want to get to that conclusion.
Yeah.
They want to know if your hero is going to defeat your villain, if your heroine is going to get the man of her dreams, whatever it is. Whatever. It can work in any type of story.
Yeah. No, yeah, it definitely can. It's definitely an interesting tool to think about and to use, and to try to use, practice with it. It doesn't come naturally a lot of times because you think, oh, I want to get to the end. I want them to know what happened. And sometimes you just, whew.
Yeah. But if you making your reader sweat will actually quicken your pace. Making them sweat by making them wait longer will quicken the pace. I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I think it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
But word choice matters as well, and in a couple different dimensions. It's the length of words.
Yeah.
You know, if you're putting in words with 7 syllables as opposed to 2, that 7-syllable word is going to lengthen your pace. It's going to slow things down. But I think it's also the sound of words.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It is more harsh words, whether that's in the sound, like harsh consonants, not harsh consonants, harsh consonants.
There's only 7 to choose from. I mean,
that's true. Harsh consonants are going to quicken the pace. If you have a word like claws or quake, those hard, harsh sounds speed things up. If you have words that have negative associations, hissing, slithering. I'm using several snake words.
You are,
apparently.
yeah, I know.
It wasn't intentional.
The next novel by J.A. George, Snakes.
Yes. Yeah. I could do an Indiana Jones thing now, but I'm not going to.
It's all good.
No. But words like sleazy, those words that have those negative connotations that people have unpleasant associations with, those make people's skin crawl a little bit, and it makes them want to move on faster. So that can also speed up the pace. It's connotations and associations with words also can play a role in that, whereas something that has, a nice feeling to it, comfort.
A dinner.
Yeah. That can slow things down. It can get people to relax, which slows down the pace. The softer sounding words, those are also going to play a role in, slowing things down. And I don't think about that very often in my own writing. I mean,
no, it's definitely not something that I sit down and think about immediately when I'm writing. I may come to a section during my edits and actually that's where I do a lot of my pacing.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, as a plotter, I do not, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yes, we will. But when I'm going back through, that's kind of when I'll look at a section and I'll look at my words a little bit, not consciously like that, though I think that's something I should probably start doing.
Yeah. Same.
But that's also when I look at my pace, because pacing is also days of the week. It's making sure that if you say 2 days past, it's actually Thursday in your novel. It's making sure that if you say so-and-so is 20 years old, that you're making the right references to their childhood if you're, going back in time a little bit. It's things like that that's important. And I do most of that in editing.
And I'm going to say one more thing before we get into that conversation about what you just said. Pacing for your character matters too.
Yes.
You don't want to be, you might want to be, but in most cases, I don't think you want to have a story where, the character goes for 48 straight hours without sleep because of how you planned out the timing, because of how you paced out the events in the novel. So that's something else important to think about as you're developing your work.
Right, for sure. There's just your readers are going to kind of assume that your character is following a similar day to them. So it's also a little jarring if all of this stuff happens and, like Ja said, 48 hours goes by and there's no sleep, there's no food, there's no, no nothing. It's just like, go. And, there are situations if you're writing a historical fiction about the war, we know that things like that happen. Yeah. So, you might get into these situations where it makes sense for your plot or it makes sense for your character, but most characters are going to get off their horse and take a nap. Yeah. Or they're going to doze off on their horse, or they're going to need to use the bathroom. Yeah. These things happen because they're ultimately people, unless you're writing about aliens.
Yeah. In which case, maybe you don't need it.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of that stuff you can handle with a scene cut. Or
Yeah.
you can handle with a scene jump, which in and of itself is a pacing tool.
Yeah, it is.
Having those scene cuts will quicken the pace. If people are moving from location to location, changing place increases pace.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was intentional.
That was
wow,
intentional. Man.
Thought of it on the fly, but it was intentional.
Yeah. I like that. And those breaks, people are going to, maybe subconsciously, I don't think it's a conscious thing, but people are going to assume that that's where a lot of the mundane things happen.
Yes, exactly.
They're going to assume that that's where your character took a nap, or where your character, ate a snack, or, those breaks are going to be the places where people insert the norm.
Exactly.
Regardless of whether or not you intend for that to be it.
Yeah. If Alex gets in a big argument and he leaves, his friend's house and then goes home, and you say the next morning, and you have a scene cut there, people are going to assume he ate dinner and he slept and everything else in that time.
Right, yeah, without you having to go into those details.
Yeah,
so.
people don't want to read minutia.
No, they don't.
Again, unless it's important to your story, but...
unless something happens during dinner. I mean, you really probably don't want to have your... that's the other thing, is if you do the break, please have your break encompass a short period of time, unless you really don't need everything in between.
Although you mentioned something interesting on that point, and I am not qualified to talk about this, but you talked about, especially in fantasy novels, the kinds of things that could happen in those time spans and how they could be longer. And I think that was kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah. So I do read a lot of fantasy. I've got a pretty hefty collection. And the one thing that I do notice that fantasy writers do, which I have a complete appreciation for, because there are a lot of things in fantasy novels that happen, is if you have a character who gets injured, or if you have a character who succumbs to some kind of magic spell issue thing, a lot of times fantasy writers put a break in there, because the reader doesn't need to know all of the pain and bone mending and food that your character had to eat to get better. So I feel like fantasy writers have an interesting control over this break thing, because a lot of times they use it to... that the character is going to get better, or the character is not going to get better, and they use that break to take out that bloody, gory, I'm going to do boring in quotes, boring part of the novel that's just going to repeat every day. And so I have a lot of respect for the writers that can kind of look at their novel and go, okay, I need to end it here, and then jump to when he takes his first step, or jump towards when he realizes that the magic in his body can shoot out like lightning. Like, I think that's important. But for the rest of us who might not be living in the fantasy world of writing, breaks should encompass the right amount of time, and usually it's a short amount of time.
Usually, yes. Yeah. And thank you, because
You're welcome.
I don't read much fantasy, so I just don't have that same frame of reference.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to talk about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that when we brought this up initially, I was like, well, that's for everybody except... and I think sci-fi writers do it too, if they have a long space voyage or something like that, unless something's happening while everyone's sleeping.
Well, I was just about to say, the one sci-fi tool that gets used a lot and can be used very unskillfully, the cryosleep.
Oh, the cryosleep.
So I'm glad you mentioned sleep, because I was just about to go there.
Yes, the cryosleep is...
Yes.
Unless you just put a bunch of Z's on your page.
Yeah. But, anyway.
It's also a video game tool.
Yes, it is. It is. So when to pace.
Yes,
we
when
were
to pace.
Talking about that,
yeah, we were moving into that a little bit.
Yeah, and then we diverged, and then we diverged again, and then again, and... Anyway, so...
It's like pantsing!
Yes. Which is making my skin crawl. But,
I'm sorry.
But no, this does speak to one of the differences between our writing styles, and it's kind of related to plotting versus pantsing.
I think so.
When do you address pacing? And, I know you were saying you do it as you're editing.
Yeah, so. Some pacing is just going to come naturally. Some pacing it's going to be written in with the things that your characters are doing, or the actions that they're taking, or the directions that they're going. So I think from the beginning... pacing is part of your novel. But I pay attention to it during my edits. Because I can look at a section and I can be like, okay, this section comes before this section. I know the section after this has to move fast, so maybe I'll slow the end of this one down. For me, it's easier to have the entire thing in front of me and then break it into those little parts and think about it that way versus from the beginning thinking, okay, well, I know that this big event is going to happen, so I really want to focus on slowing it down here. My brain just doesn't work that way. So for me, it's definitely going back into it, thinking about, you know, okay, well, I know in the next novel or the next section this is going to happen to Christopher, so I probably want to give him a little bit of a reprieve before this happens.
So my brain does not work that way.
Yes, well.
but important point, we say this every freaking episode, but do what works for you.
Absolutely.
There is no one answer. There is no one right way to pace. And it kind of irritated me when we were doing our research because there was one article that we read and discussed, and it was talking about you should do your pacing this way, and this is when you should build it in, and you should definitely do an outline. I am a plotter. I like doing outlines, and I don't think everybody should do an outline. Plotting is not for every writer. Planning out your pacing in the outline stage doesn't work for every writer because outlining doesn't work for every writer. So as much as it works for me to plan my work out, it's not going to work for everybody, you know, and I do build into my outline the pace of the section. I put in there the overall mood or tone of the section. I put in the overall pace of the section. Now, this is at a very high level when I'm doing my outline because even within a scene, you're going to have some variance in pacing. You're going to have some variance in mood. So, I mean, yes, there can be shifts in there, but I do build it in the outline stage. But that's because it works for me. But I also know that, you know, I know that after they're in my work in progress, the one that I'm about to start querying, there's an attack on like a local institution, and that leads to a riot. Well, after going for 3 chapters where you're having, you know, an attack followed by, you know, a very, very short conversation followed by a riot, I needed to give the reader a break. I knew that the next section was going to be a reflection section.
Yeah, absolutely.
It had to be. It had to be a slower because I needed to give the reader a break. I couldn't do action, lots of dialogue, action, and then try to send them hurtling through the next section as well. It didn't work for me as a writer. It wasn't going to work for a reader. Well, I had to give them that downtime.
And I think, you know, because you know, I think we touched on 2 very interesting points and maybe tools that we didn't even realize that we had. Pacing before and pacing after a section. Because, like I just said, if I know that something's going to happen to my narrator, I'm going to give him a reprieve before. Because there's a lot of things that are going to happen after. So for me, it's going to be, I'm going to kind of take it slow. I'm going to give him his break. I'm going to do these things. And then I'm going to hit it. Like, things are going to happen to him. He's going to have to make decisions. Da-da-da-da. And then eventually it's going to slow back down. But for a while, it's going to just be like, fast, 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 fast. On the opposite side, when you were describing yours, it was like, this action thing happens, and then this thing, and then this action thing, and then I give him a break. So I think it's interesting that we exampled ourselves in the middle of our own podcast without even realizing it. But that's another tool to use.
And you hit on something else that is another tool that we haven't talked about either. The use of the cliffhanger.
The cliffhanger.
Because I use cliffhangers more than you do.
Yes.
I like to end a section with a revelation or whatever, so that somebody will want to turn that next page. It was a cliffhanger that led into that action sequence that I was just talking about. You know, Alex was just going about his day. He was at, it's a superhero novel, so he was doing like a training thing at his headquarters, whatever you want to call it. He was doing his training thing, and then all of a sudden, like, actually he was about to do a training thing, so he was talking to his best friend there, and, you know, he was asking for some advice, and then all of a sudden they get summoned to, like, you know, the crisis room where they have to figure out, where they just found out that this attack has happened and they have to go into action. So it ends with that cliffhanger and then launches into the action in the next chapter. So, I use the cliffhanger, and that immediately speeds up the pace, even if it's coming at the end of like a slower section. That cliffhanger is going to speed things up for the reader.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't use cliffhangers as much. I have a respect for the cliffhanger, but my problem with the cliffhanger is it's overdone a lot of times.
Oh, it absolutely
and
can
like, so I feel like it has to be very purposeful. Like, if you're gonna use a cliffhanger, please use it well. If you're gonna end your novel on a cliffhanger, I'm not sure we can be friends. And here's why.
Okay, we're about to have an argument, but
that's
anyway,
fine. No, that's fine. So here's why. If I pick up your book or go see your movie, because this is actually the reason I don't see a lot of movies.
And movie is where I was going with this, but...
So if I pick up your book, and I'm reading your book, and I'm into it, and I'm into your characters, and I'm like, yes, I'm turning the pages, and you're doing everything well, and I get to the end, and you end it on something like, and then the floor fell out from under him, and that's where you end it, and then I have to go buy the next one, I get angry because I'm like, I just want to read a complete story. My thing is like, if you're going to give me a novel, you can have 2 novels in your series, you can have 7 novels in your series, you can have 20 in your series. Give me a complete novel up front, because you give me the complete novel and you make me love your characters and you make me love your story. I want to go buy your next book because I love your characters and I love your story. I don't need to be tricked into buying your next book. Don't trick me into buying a book!
Philosophically, I kind of agree with you. However, counterpoint. And you are not going to agree with this because I know you are not a fan of this movie.
Yes.
The greatest movie ever made
ended
on a cliffhanger. Empire Strikes Back ends on the greatest cliffhanger in history. I know you're not a fan of that movie, but...
It's not my... it is not. It is a good movie. It is not my favorite Star Wars movie.
I am aware. I am aware.
Did you really think that ends on a cliffhanger?
Yes! You find out that Darth Vader might be Luke's father? Spoiler alert.
I was just gonna say.
You find out that Darth Vader might be Luke's father. Han Solo's trapped in carbonite.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, it's a double cliffhanger even. I mean...
But, okay, so I guess here's the thing, like... So, you find out that he might be, and it's like, okay, he might be. Great. And then you find out that Han Solo's trapped in carbonite, and you're like, okay, he's trapped in carbonite. But that, to me, isn't, like... I don't know, it's still an end. Like, there's still, like, an end to it.
I don't know if the mic is picking up my exasperated sighs right now, but there are exasperated sighs.
There's a deflation on...
There is a deflation.
Like, going on right now. But no, I get your point, and I understand the cliffhanger, and if the cliffhanger is done well, I appreciate it, but overall, I think it's overdone, and just end your novel!
Like I said, philosophically, I agree with you. I do agree with you. It has... But for me, Empire did it really, really well.
No, I get it, yeah.
And bigger picture, I do agree with you, cliffhangers are overdone. But I also want to be specific about terminology here.
Yes.
For when I use the term cliffhanger, I am not necessarily referring to... It doesn't have to be a shocking moment. It doesn't have to be where the character is literally in life or death danger.
Yeah.
It could just be an interesting bit of dialogue that you're ending on.
Right.
It could be just... It could be a very minor failure, like somebody finding out they didn't get the job.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So I think if you're trying to use major cliffhangers, that gets really old really fast and really tiresome.
I agree.
But if you're using those minor setbacks for characters that keep somebody interested in them, that's kind of what I'm referring to. So maybe I'm not using the term cliffhanger appropriately, but...
I agree with you. I think there's major cliffhangers and they have a purpose, and then there's minor cliffhangers and they have a purpose.
Yeah.
And like Jay said, if your main character, you go through this whole build up for this job that they really want in this job interview, and then you end your chapter, specifically your chapter, with he recognized the number on the phone and knew it was the company calling him back.
Yeah.
And move to the next chapter. If you end it there, I can kind of appreciate
Yeah.
that. I can appreciate that ending, and I've got the next chapter. I can choose to stop reading, or I can choose to read on to see what
Yeah.
happens. But again, I don't think that would be an adequate ending for a novel.
No, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, just be wary of them, practice them, do them well,
Yeah. And
have a complete story in your novel.
don't try to shock readers every
No,
page.
don't.
I use a lot of cliffhangers, but I shouldn't say literally because that wouldn't have been accurate, but the vast, vast, vast majority of them are minor cliffhangers.
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's more like a setback than a cliffhanger.
Exactly.
So.
Well, and, you're allowed to trust that your reader wants to read on because they're invested in your story and invested in your character.
Yeah.
You're allowed to trust that you have done things well enough that that's going to carry your reader through. So, like, if you end your chapter, like, and, it was after a long day of writing, they got to the inn and went straight to bed. It's okay to end there. It's okay to end a chapter there. It's another part of pacing. Because at some point, your reader's going to have to use the bathroom. Like, they're going to have to get up and get a beverage.
I think it's going to vary widely based on what type of writing you're doing, what genre, and everything else. For me, I think part of why I use those as breaks is because it's a break for the character too.
I get that.
So it just makes sense to me. It's a mental break where the character's viewpoint shifts or something like that. So those breaks feel natural to me because they feel natural for the characters.
I get that. Yeah. No, I totally get that. So, well, that took a turn.
Yes. So, I don't know that we've got a whole lot left. There is one more thing that I know we wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet. I don't know that there's anything else. Dialogue and dialogue tags.
We just saved all the good stuff for the end.
Yeah. So, a very, very simple, very common, very useful way of altering your pace is dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
When people see those quotation marks, they're expecting repartee.
Yep.
They are expecting a back and forth. They are expecting camaraderie maybe, conflict maybe, but inherently they are expecting the tension or the interaction of two characters.
They're expecting something to happen.
Yes, exactly. And that quickens the pace.
Yes.
Unless you're monologuing, which you have to be pretty skillful to do well. It can be done.
Yes, it
but
can.
It has to be the right time, the right place in your work, and the right writing to do it well.
Yep.
We're not all... Well, anyway. I'm not going to go down that road because it had the potential to be insulting, and I'm not going to do that. So,
practice. It's like my mantra today. Practice it.
Yeah.
If you think monologuing is important, then the only way you're going to get better at it is to do it. Try it. Run it by people.
It can be useful. It can be interesting. It can be done well, but it's not easy.
Yes.
That's all I would say.
Agreed.
So, but dialogue naturally quickens things. That interaction, people don't spend 7 minutes talking before the other person gets a turn.
Nope.
You say a sentence, maybe two.
Right, yeah. It's just natural. It's just like the natural essence of human communication.
Yeah.
It's, I say something, Ja says something,
Exactly.
I say something. Like, it's the way that it works. If you're in, conversation with somebody, you both are going to have part of the conversation, unless, of course, you're being berated.
Yes.
Which sucks.
It does.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But that also leads us to an interesting discussion that, again, we are slightly at odds on. The dialogue tag, the he said Christopher, she said. I took a class in college, and I kind of already did this before the class that I took. But one of the things that the professor said in there was you do not need any other dialogue tag besides said. That's the only one that matters. Because your scene should convey how your characters are speaking to one another.
This part we agree on. But there is a part we don't agree on.
Yes. So if you are using things like shouted, yelled, whispered,
grunted,
hissed,
screamed.
Unless your character is a snake.
Yeah.
They're not hissing at people.
Right. If you use one of those once every 50 pages, okay, you get a pass, but use those things very sparingly.
Yeah, it just takes away, your people are talking to each other. They're in a scene. If they're in an argument, there's a chance that they're yelling. If they're, if they're...
People are going to pick up on that,
though. They're going to know that it's a heated exchange, So in my writing, I use said, or I don't say anything at all. Like, if I think that it can carry through, I don't use a tag. But if I use a tag, I use said, and I usually use he said or she said. I don't usually use the name, unless there's 4 or 5 guys in a room, then maybe.
So I have a comment and a question in response to what you just said. The use of dialogue tags or not using them is also something that's going to alter the pacing.
It is.
If you don't have those, he said, she said, Alex said, Christopher said, if you have those in there, even though you're already quickening the pace with dialogue, you're slowing the pace of the dialogue section by including those tags.
I agree.
My question is, because I do use tags, but I don't use... We'll get into what I use in a minute, because I don't want to distract from the question. But the how do you make it clear who is speaking? Do you use names as they're speaking, or how do you make that clear?
Yeah, so if I have a conversation between 2 people, I'll either use a name to kind of offset, if like, so for example, if Christopher and his mom are having a conversation, it's not weird for his mom to be like, Christopher. You know what I mean? Like, it's not weird in the context for her to use his name when she's talking to him, and vice versa. It's not weird for him to be like, Mom, I don't understand why you travel all the time. You know what I mean? Like, those are not weird interactions. Now, that is natural. That's how parents and children talk to one another. You have to be careful, because if Christopher and Rex, a friend of his, are talking to each other, they're not going to use each other's names.
Thank you for saying
that.
They're
not going to use each other's names. And in that context, it's better to use tags. Because, if Rex is like, oh, Christopher, do you want to go do this? Yes, Rex, I do. Like, no, that's not how friends talk to one another.
Right.
So in that context, it would be, hey, you want to go grab lunch? He said Rex. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Something like that.
That was what made me a little nervous. I'm just like, it feels unnatural to use the names too. If you throw it in every once in a while, fine. Yeah. Because, every once in a while, if you want to emphasize something, in the same way that you said with Christopher and his mom, sometimes I may be like, Samantha, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Even though I almost never use your name.
Yeah, right. No, and that happens, but like, it's got to be a natural interaction between people. Like, siblings, they might have nicknames for each other. You're going to use the nickname. You're not going to, so dialogue has to be purposeful, and it has to be natural to the individuals who are speaking. 2 strangers are going to speak completely differently. Yeah. They're not necessarily going to know the other person's name, or they're going to be like, Steve?
And then it might be, the other guy said.
Yeah, exactly. The other guy said, like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's kind of how I manage it. I make sure that I'm being true to the individuals who are speaking. The way that Christopher is going to talk to Meryl is completely different than the way he's going to talk to Matiere. Like, you have to recognize that in your characters, and you have to recognize that in their interaction, and you have to do those things.
Yeah. I use tags a little bit differently, but and this all depends on the section. It all depends on the pace that I'm going for, the tension that I'm going for. But when I'm using tags and I'm trying to maintain a quicker pace, it is the he said, she said, Alex said, Michelle said, whatever. Yeah. When I'm in a section where I want a little bit more breathing room, I use what I call the Law and Order tags. And what I mean by that is, if you watch Law and Order, whenever the detectives are interacting with somebody, it's a construction worker, and he's loading bags of cement in his truck. So I'll use those descriptions of what people are doing as my tags. Like, it might be, well, I'm going to the store today. Alex put the grocery bags in the backseat of his car. Those are the kind of tags that I'll use in the sections where I want it to be a little bit longer. So if I'm using tags, it's he said, she said, Alex said, Michelle said, or it's those action tags that are conveying who is speaking without using the he said, she said. Law and order tags, again, as I call them.
I like it. That's nice. So, yeah.
I think that is it for our episode. Any last thoughts, or are we done with pacing?
I think we are done with pacing.
Thanks for slowing it down for our outro.
Anytime.
As always, let us know what you think. Talk to us on social media, at Plugs Podcast on Twitter.
Shameless Plugs Podcast on Instagram.
Yes.
Check out our hashtag game. Hashtag Plug Yourself every Monday.
Yeah.
When the podcast goes live.
Yep.
The hashtag also goes live.
Yes.
So show yourself some love, writers.
Yeah.
So many times we just break ourselves down because we feel like it's not good enough, or we got that rejection letter, or we didn't get published in that magazine. Well, here's your chance to feel really good about what you're doing. Talk about it.
Yes.
Brag on yourself.
Brag on yourself. Increase the love to yourself. And
others.
Join us. Have fun.
Yes.
See what other people are doing. That's the purpose of hashtag games. They're fun. So join us there and check us out on YouTube. If you, like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you go to shamelessplugspodcast.com, you will see the link to the YouTube. And also on the page, I think we'll probably link to some of the articles that we referenced in this episode. So some of the ones that we liked will be up there as well.
And if you're already listening to us on YouTube, well, you smart cookie. You beat everyone else.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, Outlets. Have a good one.
See you guys next time.
Bye.